So welcome to Coaches and Runners of Louisville. We have the opportunity of interviewing Danny Chester today, so thanks for coming, Danny.
Thank you for having me.
So you were a requested athlete for Runners of Louisville, but we also wanted to tie in our new segment, Coaches of Louisville, because that's what we're focusing on in 2022. And you have a lot of experience in both realms. So
Thank you. So my one fan. Thank you, Grandma.
you have more than one fan, but so let's just go ahead and get started and just tell us a little about you as Danny Chester. Tell us.
Okay, again, my name is Danny Chester. I'm a 48-year-old masters runner here in Louisville. I grew up in Germantown. I live with my wife of 10 years in Audubon, so about 2 miles from where I grew up. Prior to running, I was a basketball, volleyball, and chess player. So
Okay, cool.
I've worked at UPS for 31 years. It'll be 31 years in September. So.
Okay, so your sports was basketball, volleyball, and chess. How did you get to running?
In running, I was challenged in my early 30s to run the Chicago Marathon. So there were some friends that were out one night, and they said, "We're going to run the Chicago Marathon." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "That's 26.2 miles." And I said, "No way you're going to do it." So they said, "We're going to do it. Can you do it?" And so the next day, we all signed up, and I trained for 4 months with them, and then we ran the Chicago Marathon. That's how I got into it. I've been hooked ever since.
Okay, so how was that first marathon experience for you? Going in with really first race experience, so what was that like?
Well, I knew absolutely nothing about running, and I didn't know anybody in the running community, and it was just these 4 girls that I trained with all summer long. And I'm not sure they knew too much about running, but 2 of them were with Team in Training. So we had a schedule that they were following, and so we would run our 4 and 5 days a week together. And I just ran their pace for the most part. I had no clue about pace. We didn't have Timex watches. We really didn't know the actual distance we were running unless we drove it off in our car. So I got into, and I was in very good basketball shape at this point, but I got into the Chicago Marathon, and one of the females of the 4 was faster, and she and I were together at mile 5, and she made a comment, "You can go on." And I had no idea what that meant. I trained with them for 4 months, like, where am I going? So at this point, I got the hint, and I took off. And I was, again, I had no concept of running, pace, time goal, or anything, but I remember thinking at mile 17 to 18 that I was going to run a 3:22 marathon, and I had no idea why I was thinking that. And up to that point, we were running 9-minute pace, if that tells you how much I picked it up. And so I started to cramp really bad, and so I walked it from 18 to 26, and I finished with a 3:43 marathon. And again, I had no concept of what that really meant, but I felt like a huge failure. And the failing part of the marathon kept me going. So I wanted to just one marathon when I signed up, and now 57 marathons later, still failing and still learning how to run the marathon.
Right. Well, it's crazy. The first experience and now 57 marathons later, that was going to be one of my questions. How many have you done? Because I know it's been a ton. So thinking about your 57 marathons, what's maybe your favorite course of all of those, or maybe one of your favorite race environments?
There are so many with 57 of them. I love our hometown race because of the people. I feel like a rock star when I'm running down Southern Parkway. The people on the race course that are around me, they actually call me a rock star because people are yelling at me. And that's because of the running community and just my hometown community. I love Indianapolis because of very similar vibe, and I love Boston, but my favorite all-time race is going to be the New York City Marathon, and that was because I got to run with Mike Corfish, Steve McFarland, and Michael Clemens. And prior to the race, Mike Corfish came up with a 3:14 marathon goal time. I still to this day have no idea why he said 3:14, and I'm not even sure I even asked him why. But if you ever run with Mike and McFarland, you know that sometimes what they say they're going to run ends up not being what they're going to run. And so I tried to make sure I corralled them a little bit and made a competition and said, we're going to run a 7:22 pace every mile, and whoever runs a 7:22 pace every mile is going to be the winner of this competition. And that was my way of keeping them, because if I sign up for a 3:14 marathon, I don't want to get dropped and they leave me and run a 3:05 marathon. Mm-hmm. So everybody was committed, and it was the most fun that we've ever had in a race. So just leading up to the race, spending time together in Central Park, and we got to meet some of the celebrity runners. Just being in New York City and the whole vibe of New York City was awesome. But getting into the actual race, just so many fun things when I think back, just from that morning of waking up so early and being the first ones to the Staten Island Ferry and wondering if we were in the right place. So all those things, looking back, were a lot of fun. In the actual race, we took photos. We stopped and took photos. I believe it was maybe mile 6 with the Brooklyn Police Department. We drank a beer at mile 9. We stopped and took a photo with the Bronx Fire Department at mile 20. Clemens and Corfish were Instagram living, so we knew who the race winners were. We were talking to people at home. We gave 5 to every person along the side of the road. My voice was hoarse afterwards. We stopped and gave his dad a hug at mile 25 and a half, and we finished with 72-year-old Glenn Dykes. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a celebrity. And we took a photo with Glenn. And then we looked down at our watches at the end, and again, we have no idea. We're having so much fun. We're not looking at pace. We have no idea what we're running. Looked down at the watch, and Mike had run a 3:14:01, and I ran a 3:14:02. And I was totally shocked.
Right.
Because, I think I had run 1:7:22 mile the whole race. And ironically, McFarland, which got out in front a little bit of us, he fell back a little bit. His overall average was a 7:22. So that New York City Marathon will stick out to me quite a bit. But I think there are so many other races that I love that also stick out quite a bit.
Yeah. That's so cool how y'all had the goal of 3:14 and Mike just threw it out there, and then you said 7:22, and then it kind of all just fell into place without paying attention.
Right.
And you had the ultimate race experience.
Right.
Whereas a lot of people don't ever have that race experience
Right.
because they're so focused on maybe a time or
Right.
just competing. Y'all were doing that. Y'all were putting in the work, but you're
Right.
also, let's have fun with this.
Yes.
Let's challenge ourselves in a different way.
Yes. Yeah. So much fun. Yeah.
So, and something you mentioned, Mike Corfish, and you've got a Corfish running shirt on, proudly representing. So tell us about your connection with Corfish and what that running group is to you.
Well, I've known Mike since I was 18, and we didn't run together until maybe late 30s. We both got into running pretty late, but Mike had already formed a group with his St. Michael's group, and that was with Tracy Edgerton in that group. So that's the Corf and the Edge part, the Corf Edge. And that group is a very solid, welcoming group. It's one of the largest running groups in Louisville, and it's because Mike and Tracy are so welcoming, and because they allow you just to be a runner. And it's not always about racing and PRing, but it's about sharing fellowship and getting to know the run community and just having a lot of fun. What role do I play in it? It's probably very small. I am, I guess, one small part of that piece, but there are so many pieces of it because it's so large. I take a back seat to quite a bit of the Corfish for very good reason, and Mike does a very good job of being a leader of that group.
He does, and I got to chat with Mike last year in our Runners of Louisville segment, so
Yes.
It was really cool to get to hear it from his perspective and hear about different races and stuff. But he is, him and Tracy, what they've started with that, I have people who will reach out to me as running swags and say, hey, we've got a new runner, or I'm new to town. They'll get on our website and message and say, hey, what are some running groups? And I'll always reach out to Mike or to you or to different people who I know, or just have a welcoming group, because that's what you want, especially if you're new to the area or new to the sport. The great thing about Corfish is they're welcoming to all.
Yes.
And so if you come, and I know on Thursdays, I believe it is, if you come, sometimes you'll have people who can't run and they're walking, or you'll have different, but there's something for everyone, which is really cool. And you get to be a part of the bigger picture and not just be the person who's injured over here and cast away until you're healthy again, which I think is awesome as a person who has been injured, and most runners have been injured, and you know what it's like to kind of be isolated, but that group is so welcoming.
We just added somebody from Frankfurt. Jacob Thompson sent me a text this past week, and a guy from Frankfurt is going to come in and run from us. Several months ago, we have a guy from Austin, Indiana, Aaron Mays, which he comes in and brings some of his high school running friends in with him. And it's so amazing. He's done so well, Aaron Mays, just by adding himself to the group and just associating with Corfish. And you know, he's built some very good relationships so far. And I know he's very appreciative to have the group.
So then going back to your running, how did you, we've talked about how you fell in love with the sport, but what has running kind of turned in and evolved into for you, starting with volleyball and basketball and other sports, but then now running is something that you do a ton of. So
Are you saying that I'm married to running?
I'm not saying that, but you do love it.
I would say my relationship with running, and I love running. Running is a very simplistic thing. There's you can do running anytime, anywhere, in any way you want to do it. And I love to be active. And because I love to be active, the simplicity of running makes that a lot easier. You don't have to have a gym. You don't have to have a ball. You don't have to have a team. You can just go out and do whatever you want. My relationship with running, again, like any relationship, you have to have love for it. You have to be committed and have to communicate and you have to be resilient. I listened to a Strava, I believe it was a Strava poll recently that polled 25,000 runners, and only 8% of the runners said they love running, which I found shocking. And I was like, maybe they polled the wrong people. But there's not a run that I don't absolutely love. There's not a day that I don't wake up and say, oh, I got to run. I wake up and let's go. I'm ready to run. And there's different variations of the running that get me excited to run, whether it's a slow day, a hill day, a fast day, whether I'm running alone with music, whether I'm running with people. But I love to run. And, I have my reasons for why I love to run, and that's unique to me, is that I want to challenge myself. But I don't want to overdo the challenge, and I want longevity. I want to run until, in my 70s and 80s. And I know that running is hard on the body, so I have to make sure that with my why I'm doing this, that I don't cross the line that breaks me. I want to run a marathon in every state, and I want to Boston qualify every state. So I'm not getting any younger. In fact, I'm getting older as we sit here. So I need to get on it. And, I have 18 more states to go. But I love to run and experience each state, and I love a slow marathon, and that is me. So I understand that's my why, and I have to be careful about comparisons that I may have, or somebody comparing themselves to me, or somebody challenging me in a way that's not my why. So I have to continue to communicate to myself, and I'm committed. If there's one thing that you'll know, that I always show up. So I may not be the fastest or the longest runner, but I'm going to show up, and that commitment is very important to me. And then being resilient. You're going to have good and bad days. You're going to have good and bad seasons. You're going to have good and bad races, and you just have to be resilient to your whys and continue to say commitment and understand that you're doing it because you love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then you also talked about not pushing yourself so far that you want the longevity. Mm-hmm. And so what are some other things that you do to make sure that you can be in this sport as long as possible?
Well, I try to do a lot of strength training, and ironically, right now I'm going through a potential injury. So strength training is very important to me to find the weaknesses. I've, I guess, found a weakness here recently that I didn't realize that I had, and it's causing some issues. So when I speak to a lot of runners, I do speak, A, about nutrition, very important to me, B, about ensuring you reduce as much stress as possible in your life, C, ensuring that you get enough sleep, obviously that being important, and then for the strength training. Being that I am not a parent, it's a lot easier. All those things are a lot easier for me, but my responsibilities aren't as great as what some others have in our running community. So again, easier to speak about, but just making sure that I stay active with strength, as well as mixing it up a little bit with my volleyball, and mixing it up a little bit with basketball. I don't do basketball as much anymore, but I need to. I'm realizing that I need to, and that's causing some of my weaknesses.
Okay, because I guess you didn't realize you had those weaknesses, because when playing basketball, you're moving differently than obviously running, and you didn't realize how that was actually benefiting you instead of maybe hindering you.
Right. So in basketball, I had a very strong left leg because I needed to, based on the mechanics of the game. And I quit playing basketball in January of 2017 when I had two players on a team go down with an injury, and I was training for my first Boston. And so I said I better step away for a little bit and then make sure I get through Boston. In September of that same year, I hired a strength coach, and during a step-up exercise, I realized that my left leg was already extremely weak, and I did absolutely nothing about it. In 2019, I developed an injury with quadricep tendonitis, and I was able to get through 6 months in the summer of racing and running with that tendonitis, and I was improved it, but I didn't strengthen it. I was realizing over this past year, I ran a lot of races this past year in a lot of pain, and a lot. I don't bring it up a lot because I don't want the criticism, and I don't want to, hey, you need to step away from it. But a lot of I was running differently, knee pain, back pain, and I was able to get through it. Everything was fine. But it causes other issues. And so I realized it was probably close to 6 weeks ago that I had some quadricep atrophy, and as a result, I went to the gym, just like my running, way overboard, and caused some more issues with that. And so now I'm dealing with some, we'll say, left leg issues, and it'll be resolved soon.
Right. So in that, though, part of being a runner is injuries and things do come up.
Yes.
So how do you handle that, both on the physical side and the mental side?
Yeah. So that obviously is very tough. It's we all have. It's going to happen to us. But you have to stay positive. And part of what I mentioned with my relationship with running is A, remember that you still love it. B, you're still committed. You have to find a way. And then C, that you're resilient. So you have to, again, it's mentally tough, but, this past week I've had 4 or 5 runs that have not been good and have been very frustrating. And I was coming off a very good workout Tuesday. Wednesday I was fine, and then Thursday on I've had some very bad runs, very frustrating, where I've had to walk after a half mile. I run and pace with a lot of the runners that I coach, and I was on a workout with one of the runners, and it just so happens this day was probably the most phenomenal day that I've seen her, and she was absolutely crushing this run. She looked like she could run a marathon at this interval pace, and I couldn't keep up. So that was disappointing for me because I wanted to be there for the whole run, but it does get frustrating, but you have to stay positive and understand your relationship with running and why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. So in talking about some of the races that you've done in New York and all those things, you don't just do marathons. You do ultras. You've done a lot of shorter races. So what is your favorite distance to race?
My favorite distance to run is the marathon because I like to train hard. always, and I like to slow down and enjoy the experience. I think my favorite distance to race would be the half marathon. I don't do it as much. I think I raced 2 half marathons this year. And it's hard to do all of them, and it's hard to stay in shape for the different races. And I wouldn't say that I'm very good at any of those distances because I don't focus on one distance. I think had I focused on a distance, I would be much better at that distance. But I think that helps my mind, running all the different distances, staying in moderate to decent shape for all of them. That's what I enjoy, and I don't have to be the best at any distance. I just want to be a combination of a well-rounded runner and ready to run whenever. But again, the half marathon is definitely, yeah.
And then how do you keep yourself able to do things back to back to back? I know this year you had Boston, and Boston was in the fall because of COVID. So you had that, and then so that was on the Monday, and then on Friday you came back and you were doing the ultra distance of Bourbon Chase. So, and you've done marathons back to back as well. So how have you trained your body to be able to handle the pounding, to recover, all of those things?
Well, running has taught me quite a few things, but running has taught me that people can do amazing things, and your mind and body can do amazing things. And I learned several years ago by mistake, after a marathon, I signed up for a volleyball tournament, and I limped to the volleyball tournament, and through the first set, I could barely get off the ground. But after a few sets and a few matches of volleyball, it was almost like I never had run a marathon the day before. So I made that mistake twice, and then I said, oh, I think I'm onto something. So in 2018, I ran a marathon a month, and some of those marathons fell within, 3 of them fell within a 6-week period. So I had to teach myself to recover quickly, and how you do that is, and there is a line you don't want to cross. And I don't really want to say or influence runners to do what I have done unless it's something they're willing to do and know that they're at risk. But immediately after a marathon, I am in the gym the same day, or I'm at home doing strength work the same day, working on my legs, working on blood flow. And then a lot of times you'll see that you wouldn't know this, but a lot of times my marathons aren't at an effort that that it just totally takes me to the brink of exhaustion. So I'm able to go out the next day and do a tempo run because of the way I ran the marathon and because of the way I've prepared myself with the recovery. But a lot of it takes practice, and a lot of it takes focus mentally to prepare yourself for that, and you have to know that it may hurt a little bit in the beginning, but eventually you get stronger from it. So every runner is going to be different, and everybody has their limits, so you have to be careful about not crossing that line when you're trying to do that.
Great. So then talking about just the different distances, you've done a ton of marathons, but you also do some ultras. So tell us about those experiences that you've had with those distances.
Okay, so I'm not very smart with the ultra marathon. In a marathon, I do not fuel. So I think in 2018, I had taken 3 gels total for the 12 marathons. And so I met with Thomas Cave of Thompson Training 3 or 4 days before my ultra. And because I lose focus and because I don't follow a schedule, a calendar, I've never followed a plan, I asked Thomas if he would coach me for a marathon. And so one of the first things he said to me was, you're going to have to take like 7 or 8 gels in a marathon. And I was like, no way. In 2018, I only took 3 total with 12. So I had an ultra that I was preparing for that following Sunday. So I met with him on Thursday, ultra on Sunday. And I had done several 30-mile runs, even in the summer, without fueling. And so I was pretty confident that I didn't need to fuel. So I show up to this ultra, and from Louisville, there's only a few of us that are doing the 50. And I basically was alone, and we had some friends that were doing the 100-mile distance. And so I show up without nutrition. I show up without a crew, and I get to mile 36 without taking anything. And so I would not have stopped at 36. I was having some other issues, but at 36 they had this great aid station that it looked like Thanksgiving dinner. And so I was probably there for like 10 minutes. And they had mashed potatoes, they had chicken quesadillas, I mean, everything you wanted. And so I was taking one of everything. And that was at mile 36, and that's the first time I had eaten. And by mile 41, well, by mile 37, my stomach was not good. And by mile 41, I threw most of that up on the side of the road. So by, I guess after that, I was feeling better, and I ran well for 3 or 4 miles, and then I got hungry again, and so it was not good. But the ultra, it's a totally different environment. It's a total different kind of running. Each race distance is very different, and you really have to train specifically for it if that's what you want to do. In my opinion, but I was not mentally and physically prepared for it. Now, I finished the race, and I did okay, but I know that I could have done much better, and that part of failure is what keeps me going. So I say failure. It was a good race time. It was competitive, and it was fine, and not to take anything away from it. But again, knowing that I could do better in the back of my mind keeps me wanting to potentially do it again.
Okay, cool. So then you did the ultra distance of Bourbon Chase. So we have some people who've done Bourbon Chase, but tell us and you've done the 12-man team. And so the ultra distance is 6 people on a team, or the 12 is the normal distance size team. So tell us about the difference experience doing the ultra versus having 12 people on your team.
I don't want to do ultra anymore. That was awful. So we had a great team, and we actually did very well. We came in 5th overall as a team, in first place in the ultra, men's ultra, with 2 females, and these females are unbelievable runners. But again, we had a great team, and I was struggling a little bit, but I knew I had to do it for the team. We signed up for this a couple of years ago because we were training for, the group was training for the Tunnel Hill 50-miler, and that was the way that we were going to prepare ourselves. And so didn't realize Boston was going to be that close, and we got back into it. And there was, I guess, on my team, we may have only had 2 Boston runners on this team, so the other 4 were like super competitive and charged and ready to go. And so I had to be prepared. And so we had a runner that dropped out, and we picked up another runner, but I took the runner that dropped out his spot. And I knew that I was going to have to run 41 miles. I didn't know which 41 miles it was going to be. And it turns out it wasn't a very good 41 miles. So we, if you've ever done the Potter Shop leg, it's pretty challenging. And then they added on to, I guess, I can't remember what they called that leg, but it was an 11-mile leg. So my first run was 21 miles. And I made it fine back to the van, but I cramped, and I made drank a jar of pickle juice afterwards. And I had no idea how I was going to run my next couple of legs, but everything was fine. And my next 8 miles was pretty flat, and then the last leg was pretty awful, but I think I was hungry the whole time. So again, didn't feel very well. But Bourbon Chase is one of the best experiences that I experienced all year, because you're in that team environment, and it's so much fun to be out there. Oddly, it's kind of fun. So our team was out in front once we got to my final leg, and I was running solo by myself in the dark through Woodford. That was a little eerie. extremely dark and nobody around. And that was, as a team, it was fun to cross the finish line first. But again, coming in 5th overall was pretty exciting.
Yeah, because they started you all at like noon or something.
We
right?
started, I think, 11:30,
Right.
11 or 11:30, and we had written several emails and responses back and told them that we thought we should run a little bit later. We got to our first runner got to his one of his legs, and they didn't have anybody staffed there. So we were going to have to wait. So we had to call the race directors to get somebody there as soon as possible, so that we didn't have to him wait to take off again,
Right.
or I was going to have to run like an 8:30 pace, which looking back may have been great. Or I was going to have to run 8:30 pace for one leg to transition, so that we wouldn't have to wait out there and get cold and change
Right.
and all that sort of thing. So it all worked out, but yeah, that was pretty fun.
What an experience.
That was an experience, yes.
So you kind of hinted at it earlier, but you are working with, and Thompson Training is working with you, but you're also working with them.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
that makes sense. So tell us about what that is like, both as an athlete and as a coach with them.
Okay, so Thomas Cave, he's an unbelievable individual, such a nice young man, but also a great young coach. And I've had the opportunity to work around and run around Thomas for a couple years, and again, he is amazing. I didn't know Jacob as well going into it, but watching those two with the kids is absolutely amazing. They had done such a great job, and the kids look up to them, and they run really well for them, and they're doing a great job with their team. Being coached by Thomas, again, he's a great young man. For me, being a coach is very important to build a relationship and make adjustments and give support, and he does just that. So it's been great.
Cool. And so with him, and you are coaching with, are you doing it all year round? I know you're doing postseason type stuff with their kids, but tell us what that experience is like for you.
So I just volunteered for a couple months with their fall running, and that was amazing. So I coach runners and getting to adult runners, and getting to coach younger runners, obviously a different experience. They're both very passionate, but the younger runners, they have an innocence of they don't realize how much that hurts. The adults know how much it hurts when they're out there doing 800s. So there's many times where the young runners are asking for more, and obviously the adults don't want any more than to give them. But I remember pacing two young females on we were doing 800s, and they ran the first one way too fast. And so I said, do you guys mind if I pace you for the next one? And I was trying to hit a specific pace for them, and they were all for it. Yeah, let's go. And so we take off, and I've never seen or been a part of anything like this. The two girls were right on top of me, and they're on both sides, and both their elbows are basically hitting me in the stomach, and they're so tight I can't move my arms. And I thought, I was a little scared, but I thought, this is amazing. I love this. But I had to back out because it was a little too much for me, and I paced them to the finish. But it's kind of the same way with some of the other runners that I pace. I love being out there on their workouts, and I love being beside them when they're running, and I get a lot out of that, a lot of inspiration. But it's different. The conversations are different. If I'm out with my runners, they're talking about work and kids, and then the same day I'm training younger runners, and they're talking about their favorite subjects and what they had for lunch. So I can remember a specific day when I'm out with a female group of runners in the morning, and they're talking about their work and sorting things, and then I'm out in the evening and I can't add to that conversation. But I'm out in the evening with 2 young females, and we're doing 800s, and I ran the first one with them, and I took the second one off, and they were a little slower. And I thought, I wonder what they're doing. So I ran the third one with them, and we were about maybe 200 meters into the third 800, which should be pretty hard. And one girl asked the other girl, she says, so what's your favorite subject? I was like, I see what's going on here. And then about a quarter of a mile into it, the other one asked what the other one had for lunch. And it's all fun, and, you know, they were outstanding that day, but it's just different.
Right.
Yeah, and it's fun.
Right. Well, now talking about coaching, how did you get into coaching?
Well, I've always wanted to be a coach, and my dream job would be a coach of a college basketball team. And I've actually never coached basketball. Actually, I'm 0-1 in basketball. When I was 13 years old, I was playing in a basketball all-star game. And after the game, I hear some adults say that an 8-year-old's coach didn't show up. And they were asking other adults if they wanted to coach. And I yelled out, hey, I'll do it. And so I coached, and I'm 0-1, and we were crushed. But that was the most fun I think I've ever had in basketball. So as a 13-year-old, I'm coaching 8-year-olds. And I think I laughed more than I gave instructions or led. But you know, all the kids played, and they'd come in and out, and we'd high-five each other, and we would giggle. And I knew absolutely nothing about coaching basketball, but I knew that I wanted to do it. So I started at UPS in 1991 as an 18-year-old, and I didn't think that I would stay there my whole life, but I'm still there. And I got into management extremely early, and as a management employee, I'm able to coach, develop, and lead, and I treated my work groups kind of like my basketball team. So I would develop point guards, I would develop this, I would develop that, and I would develop each individual. And I always had a saying, make these people as good as you or better. So I worked relentlessly hard at developing people, and I absolutely loved it. And a lot of that with developing is you have to understand the individual, and you have to build a relationship, and you have to know, because every person is unique, and you can't coach one person the same way you can coach another. So getting into run coaching, I knew that, or I know that when I retire, I really want to do it, and that's not too far off, 6.5 years. But I was finishing a run in late 2019 at Seneca, and a runner, Becca Gisvadikas, she stopped me, and we were talking about marathons, and she went on to say, I don't mean to keep you, but, and I said, oh no, I could talk about running, you know, all day long. I want to be a coach. And she said, oh, and that's when I became a coach. So she introduced me to a friend of hers, Leora, and Leora was coming off a Indianapolis half marathon, and she wanted to Boston qualify a marathon approximately 8 weeks later. And so I was introduced to Leora, and we worked together for 8 weeks, and not only did she Boston qualify, but she also New York City qualified, and that's how my running started. And so, you know, I take it very serious, but I don't, we'll say that I just take it extremely serious. I'm very passionate about it, and I know it's very important to other runners, but it's not a huge part of my life right now. I think one day it will be, but with my other responsibilities, it's not as big, as well as with running and working and family and those types of things. Eventually, I would like for it to be bigger than what it is. So I try not to get too out of balance, but it has been fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think, or just talking about how you're coaching like younger athletes and then also coaching adults, a lot of the times I feel like there's that misconception of once you graduate high school or once you finish collegiate athletics that your coaching, like being coached days are over. But in running, or just in general, it doesn't have to be that way. And just changing that script and that narrative and saying, it's, if you want to meet this goal or that goal, have a coach and have someone that is going to help you reach those goals. So can you speak to that, about how important it is for even adults to realize that having a coach is beneficial and it's a good thing?
Yeah. Well, I will start by saying not everybody needs a coach. It's part of understanding your whys and what you're doing it for. And your why may be that you want a PR, but at the same time, you don't want the stress of some other things that come along with having somebody continually watching your running or holding you accountable. With your whys and your purpose, you can PR without a lot of those things. So I don't necessarily think that everybody needs a coach. I don't think everybody thrives on a coach. Again, up till this point, I never had a coach or followed a schedule, and I was able to get by because I didn't want I don't want running to suck the life out of me, for lack of a better phrase. So, and it's also very important that you find the right coach. Everybody is coachable, but I can't coach everybody, meaning that you have to share similar characteristics. And Mike Corfish and I were talking about this. As a coach, I'm more of a coddler. I like to say, nice job, you did good, we'll get it next time. And he's a little bit different from that. And I think it works, provided you're coaching the people that it works for. If the things that I do don't work for some of the runners that I'm coaching, then I wouldn't be good for them. But again, it's very important that you share very similar characteristics. It doesn't have to be all characteristics, but similar characteristics of your coach, and you pick the right coach. And again, with coaching, for me, the biggest part of coaching is building a relationship and teaching and ensuring that I see every runner as an individual. So I may have run 57 marathons, and I may have a way and experience of getting through that marathon, but I don't put that experience on somebody else. The way I got there is going to be different. So again, making sure that I understand them as an individual through relationship building and understanding what makes them confident and least confident is very important. And then trying to make them really good at what they're most confident with. And that is what's important to me, but also giving them a great amount of support when they need it. So I do about 1% or less of what they've done. So some of my most proud moments of running this past year were with actually all my most proud moments were with the runners that I coach. And they inspire me every single day, and I do very little for them. It's those people hold themselves accountable. They're up every morning to run. They put in the work, and they may just need somebody just to give them a little bit of support to say you did a great job. And they may need just a little bit of direction, but for the most part, they're doing the work, and it's extremely inspiring.
Right. So we've talked about two of the names that you're representing today, but you also have LDP, which is the Long Distance Project. So tell us about the Long Distance Project and how you're involved with that.
The Long Distance Project, I believe that started in late summer of 2019 with Glenn McCaslin and Dave Long, and I believe Thomas Cave was a part of that. Mm-hmm. And in that discussion, they wanted to bring a unique racing team to Louisville. And that's what they did. And with the USA Track and Field certification, they built their team. I don't add any value to this racing team, by the way, but I got into LDP so that I could potentially learn from coaching and learn from Dave Long. And that was going to be myself, Glenn, Thomas Cave, and Dave Long. We're going to be the coaches. But then with COVID started, we've kind of lost track on that. But with LDP, we do have some masters runners, men's and women's, and we do have the younger fast runners. And I was able to coach one of the runners and pace and guide one of the runners, but that was the only opportunity that I had. Now, Glenn McCaslin is coaching quite a few of these runners at this point, and he came to me and asked me if I would meet with him regarding nutrition, strength, and those types of things that I give to the runners that I'm talking to. And so we got together, and I said, well, why don't we just have a camp and bring it all together? And so there are some professionals around the community that could help us with this. And so we had an LDP run camp this past summer. And for the first one, I thought it was fantastic. It wasn't really about running, but it was about gaining information outside of running that's going to help us supplement the running part. And I think the group enjoyed it. I think myself and Glenn, we enjoyed putting it together, and I think that we will try to add on to it this summer.
Awesome. I got to be a little small piece of that, and I thought it was really cool to be able to provide that to adults.
Yes.
Because you think of running camp for adults. I helped put on one for kids. And I'm like,
Yep.
This is such a cool thought because I had never experienced one before. So getting to come and see what you all are doing, because you have some people like yourself didn't get into running until later. Well, you have to learn everything, you know,
Right.
and you didn't start it when you were 10 years old at school, you know, so
Right.
taking the time and having those resources and tools, which I thought was really cool and a great thing to add to the Louisville running community. So thank you for bringing that to us. And then talking about the community and what the running community is like in Louisville. It's a special place, and you've talked about just 3 groups that make up the running community, but there's so many others. So what do you think makes the Louisville running community so special?
There are so many groups, and every group is very dynamic, but every group is very welcoming, provided you can keep up with your SWAGs group. But every group is very welcoming and full of wonderful people. So again, we talked about the LDP group. I wasn't as familiar with the younger runners as well as the masters runners in the group. More familiar. They're an outstanding group of people. Corfish has 300 plus runners, and I'm extremely familiar with that welcoming group, and they've been awesome. Thompson Training is a little bit different of a dynamic with the coaching of the kids as well as coaching adults. And then you have the SWAGs elite group as well as the Fleet Feet groups. You have Ken Combs that has a group as well. And then another unique group is the Derby City Run Club. That was a group that I think I ran with them 3 years after they began their run group, and I had never heard of them. And they were starting 3 miles from my house every Monday. And I'm like, how do I not know about this group? And because, again, I want to be involved in every group. But so I started running with them, and they have some fantastic runners. And it started with a guy that, when I ran with them, after 3 years of its inception, I believe I was the only Louisville runner, born and raised Louisville runner, that was with that group that day. So they'll have 60-plus runners, and for the most part, these runners have moved here from out of town, not knowing anybody. A guy was at I don't know if he was at a bar, but said, hey, I'm going to run. And that's how it all started. And it has ballooned to what it is. And it's a fantastic group. COVID has really kicked its butt a little bit, but they're still thriving pretty well.
Right. I remember I went to, I think it was probably their last run before COVID kind of happened, because I had been away at school and came back. I'm like, okay, I want to go to some of these other running groups now that I'm able to, and not going to school practices and things. And very welcoming, and I go, and I'm like, this is awesome. And then COVID happened.
Right.
So I'm excited for all of these groups to begin meeting again.
And again, I said they're all very dynamic, and they're all very different groups. But at any point, you'll see a lot of the runners merge together into different groups. And so it's great to see. And based on all these unique and dynamic groups, we built the River City Club Challenge, and which was fantastic. And that was fun. It was made for a fun spring last year. But again, it's the dynamics of the group and the welcoming and the great people that make it so special.
So last thing here, so we're at the start, beginning stages of 2022. What are some things that you're looking forward to within the running realm of 2022 for you, or maybe some of your athletes, or the running community as a whole?
Well, 2021 started out with 0 goals, and I had a fantastic year with myself and my athletes and with the different clubs that I run with. This year's kind of starting out the same way. I don't have any goals for myself individually. I do have a race coming up in a couple weeks, provided I get this left leg worked out. But this year, I know myself, Glenn McCaslin, Corfish, and then even you, we've talked about bringing back the River City Club Challenge. I think that's a very fun event. I think everybody enjoyed it. There was a lot of enthusiasm amongst the run group. There were a lot of run groups that were not included that didn't realize we had it going on, so we could do a better job this year of communicating and inviting more into the run group. But also putting on another run camp. That is very important for us adults that, again, started late and want some knowledge of how to become a better runner and a healthy runner. And also maybe potentially starting, or I guess, taking my coaching a little bit more serious and growing and maybe coming up with my own coaching company. That could be coming up pretty soon as well. But with the runners that I have, always looking forward to the races and coaching them. I get more inspired and I have more love for the runners that I coach than my own races. So when they come to me with a race and we start putting it together, I get more excited for that than I do my own. So I'm looking forward to coaching this year, those individuals, and seeing their PRs. And I can't wait for a great 2022, see how that turns out, because 2021 was fantastic.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you for coming today, Danny. I've enjoyed getting to hear more about your story, and I always enjoy seeing you out on a run or running with you. Is there anything you would like to add for this before we wrap up?
Shout out to all the athletes that have allowed me to work with them this past year. Becca, Leora, Andrew, Bo, Joe Burkett, Jamie Alignani. Thank you. I know it's very important to you. And again, thank you for allowing me to work with you. Shout out to the Corfish running community. Your endless support in the community is the best that I've ever seen. Your support and enthusiasm and passion during the River City Club Challenge was unmatched, and thank you for representing the Corfish family. Shout out to Glenn McCaslin of the Long Distance Project. Your creativity and passion and love for the running community that helped support the River City Club Challenge, as well as the LDP adult clinic. Shout out to Thompson Training and Thomas Cave for being great young role models for their young athletes. Parents, if you have athletes that are interested in running, Thomas Cave is one of the best. He's a very good example and role model for your kids. Shout out to Swags and Allie for this runner profile, as well as her running team for winning the River City Club Challenge. And shout out for all the support that she gives to the community with Iroquois Hill Runners and such. Shout out to everybody that's coming back from injury, that's working through some issues and being resilient. Shout out to the medical providers that help us daily in our community, such as Cal Bowling and Kara Nichols. Shout out to your parents, that have kids that are out there every single day that are committed to running, especially your mothers. You are very, very inspirational to me. Shout out to my top 5 runners of the year. We'll start with, in no particular order, Piper Gray. a young running phenom that had 5,000 miles of running this past year. I need to get her autograph before she gets too big for me. Shout out to number 2 and 3 to John Bizzle as well as Elia Jalali for being cyborgs in their phenomenal year of marathoning. Shout out to Becca Jizvidikis for her commitment and consistency in running, and has been very inspirational to me, and her tons of PRs this past year. And last but not least to Joe Burkett for allowing me to coach, pace, and guide him through many of his PRs. It's unbelievable what Joe Burkett does as a blind runner, and being a sight guide was probably one of the highlights of my year. So thank you very much. Shout out to the young coaches out there that are working with our young athletes, college, high school, elementary, middle school coaches that are positive role models for our future running community. Shout out to 3 coaches, my coaches of the year. Well, there's multiple coaches, but we'll go with Mike Corfish, what he's done with his athletes. Outstanding job with so many great runners, and Mike's passion for the running community is endless and cannot be matched. Shout out to Dave Gracehaber and what he's done to some of his, or with some of his young athletes. And again to Thomas Cave for what he's done with Thompson Training and those young athletes. If I've missed you, I apologize, but shout out to you for getting out there every day doing you, whether it's an ultra marathoner, whether you're a 5K or miler. You do you, do not compare yourself to others, but shout out to you for always being committed and resilient. Thank you.